Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Wendy Buck, Marketing Communications Specialist at Wealth Engine, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual event titled Playing Nice, How Gift Officers and Research Shops Can Maximize Effectiveness. Before we get started, I would like to remind you that we are recording this session. A link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides will be available approximately 24 hours after the webinar. Throughout the presentation, you are welcome to address your questions via the question and answer box, and our staff will try to answer them as we go. We will address as many questions as we can during the Q&A portion of this webinar. At this time, I am pleased to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Our first presenter is Linda Garrison. Linda joined Wealth Engine in 2013 with more than 20 years of nonprofit experience in management, board development, fundraising, public relations, and prospect research. A seasoned nonprofit expert, Linda is especially known for her skill in major donor strategy and campaign implementation. Linda has served nonprofits in both frontline development and public relations functions for nearly every type of nonprofit in the 501c3 universe, including healthcare and hospitals, advocacy organizations, higher education and K-12 private schools, social and human service agencies, and state-based. Our other presenter today is Mike Olson. Mike has worked for Michigan Technical University for the past 11 years, first serving as a development officer and later transitioning to the research side. A graduate of Michigan Tech, Mike is active in APRA and CASE. Mike and Linda, thank you for joining us today. And now, Linda, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. First, a little bit of full disclosure. Both Mike and I have sat on both sides of the professional fence, which can get a little pokey. When I first fell sideways into fundraising, I wrote grants. And then I discovered prospect research when it was really taking off by using online sources. And around that time, I discovered Wealth Engine. I was working for a consulting firm and building out the prospect research arm of the firm. But as Wendy mentioned, I've also been a frontline fundraiser, one-person shop, a small shop, and also a campaign director at a university. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career path?
Sure. Well, I came in, like a lot of people in advancement, pretty sideways. Right out of college, I started out as a newspaper reporter and writer. And I worked for a media tracking company, both in a research role and then in sales. I owned a bar for a while. I was a shopping mall manager. And then, like Wendy said, about 11 years ago, started with Michigan Technological University in advancement. At that point, it was right at the very beginning of planning for a silent phase. I was one of the first hires to ramp up for that. After 3 years on the road, moved into a research role, and that's where I've been now for about 7 or 8 years.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Okay. So as an overview of today's webinar, here's our roadmap. We're going to take a look first at the secret self-images of researchers and gift officers. Researchers, would those be data geeks with wings? Would those be sort of the secret mojo behind great fundraising? What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think we kind of think of ourselves as rational, logical, being well-organized, well-behaved people. In the advancement high school, we're the hall monitors, or we're like Spock on Star Trek, and we're pretty proud of towing it pretty close to the line.
Okay. How about gift officers? I have to admit I'm guilty of this. Thinking that gift officers are sort of the masters of the art of relationship building, the Wren laws of relationships, Picasso's of partnerships. You get my drift. Yeah.
I think, well, like in advancements at high school, the gift officers are like the kids who got the three-pointer at the buzzer. So they can run through the halls, run past us hall monitors, get away with a little bit of it, and they kind of like being those gunslingers.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they get the positive attention from their institutions. They bring in the money for the new art wing or the new MRI machine. So they kind of get that superstar status. There's a glow put around them. Gotcha.
So then we end up having power struggles or outright war. Maybe a sad acceptance of each other without any understanding. Why do we have this clash?
Well, I think it's
clash. This clash. Okay.
Well, I think it's kind of the researchers of like I said, like the hall monitors. They like to favor the order and maybe be a little more out of the limelight. Gift officers get that all that praise and attention, and they kind of seek out the spotlight. So you got two different breeds of people here.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, that's going to create conflict and tension when you've got such divergent personalities, right?
Exactly. And then what it seems to me is in some institutions, so the research shops aren't just charged with just research and analysis, but they're also policing the moves management process. They're making sure the contact reports and proposals are in, they're in correctly, they're in a timely manner. So they're marshaling these processes and being a cop on the beat, and that can cause a clash. And another problem is researchers live in a data world, and gift officers aren't really always data people. They don't like it. They don't really trust it so much, and so there's kind of a language disconnect going on. And then when research, sometimes, we're not always perfect. We might forward to a gift officer a prospect that we're high on, but in reality turns out to be a dud. And as human nature goes, these gift officers will remember that one dud and forget about the 8 or 10 times where a hit was delivered. So they get that confirmation bias working in our relationships too. And
yeah,
I think
you're definitely right there.
And I think that's just when it's time to manage the expectations. If we, as researchers, are telling our gift officer staff that, or leading them to believe that there's going to be nothing but hits, without letting them know that there's going to be an occasional dud, we're undermining our own credibility in the long run. And also,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was going to say with credibility, the information has to be correct, not just the analysis of whether a person's really what their capacity or their propensity is, but the data has to be correct. If it's a wrong phone number or a dead email, these are the types of things that can kind of bottle up.
I would totally agree with you, and I'd also add that that's why data cleansing is so important before you do any kind of reading. And it's also why I tell my clients that I work with, don't expect perfection. Look for directional accuracy from your screening results. And I would say also expect your research officers to provide you with directional accuracy.
Right.
So let's look at some common personality traits between the two groups. And please remember, this is in broad terms. Not everybody fits these profiles. So research professionals tend to be introverted, not, stoic loners, but, people they're comfortable working on their own. They recharge by having alone time. They tend to be intuitive. That's a great trait to have as a researcher, so that you don't go chasing bunny trails. You go chasing what your gut is really telling you that you gleaned from this data and that data. You've got to be persistent. You've got to be curious. A lot of them tend to be really process-oriented, which I think is where some of the clashes really come in. And then being detailed and organized is great too, although I've seen researchers with 1,001 yellow Post-it notes all over their desk. So maybe that's the glittering generality. And if you look at Myers-Briggs type, all of the I's, the INTJ, the INTP, or the ISTJ, and you'll see they're all intuitive, knowing, thinking, perceiving, or judging, which kind of stands with those other traits.
Right. Like I was saying,
yeah.
The hall monitors that really kind of like the rules and like a lot of order, that, again, in broad terms.
Right. So gift officers, on the other hand, tend to be extroverted. That's not all the time, because there are these outliers called INFJs that can be fantastic gift officers because they're great listeners. Extroverted in general, imaginative, dreamers. The best gift officers I know are dreamers. They come up with big dreams, big visions. They are on fire for the organization. They want to see it go to the next level. So they're creative and curious, and they're very driven, and they're very self-motivated. And I would say that researchers are self-motivated as well. So there is a commonality, a place where we can get along. So if we're going to generalize with the Myers-Briggs, we're looking at ESTJs, ESTPs, ESFPs, and then that quirky little INFJ, which represents about 1% of the general population.
Right. These are, back in the high school, these are the kids running through the halls, ignoring the hall monitors, or they're the James Kirk on Star Trek. If researchers are Spock, they're more of the James T. Kirks.
I like it. Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of changing. There was a report that was put out a few years ago by BWF Research that said that hiring managers are now looking for personality similarities among researchers and gift officers, so that there's not only strong research and investigative skills, but relationship building. I think that is maybe not such a good thing. What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, I think that everybody can relate to this. If you're a researcher and your gift officers come off the road and they look at you and they're like, how can you stand being at your desk all the time? I would feel like I was chained, like I was in prison. You need the type of person who can fit what the position requires of them. So you can't really do a Frankenstein's monster. You really need to look at what's expected of their role, and then finding the person who's going to fit in that role and be happy and successful.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of thinking that this trend may be a bit because hiring managers are getting kind of sick and tired of the revolving door with gift officers. What is it? The average tenure right now is about 18 months. But I think, if you think about the relationship issues that we all struggle with as gift officers. It could be, who do we report to, and then we've got our researchers trying to control the moves management and all of that. I think really the goal would be, or the problem would be unrealistic goals and expectations that can cause some significant burnout or otherwise limit, success and how long a gift officer stays at an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that kind of turnover, if it's an 18-month turnover, there's time to really take a look back and see what's going on.
I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what if I always like to talk about campaigns, major gift campaigns, and capital campaigns, because I can't help myself. I'm really passionate about those. So let's take a look at what should happen if you're contemplating some sort of a major gift campaign. Campaign 101, I think almost everybody on this webinar knows that we're looking at a psychology of impact rather than sort of the kumbaya of the annual fund. We're looking at large transformational gifts placed over 3 to 5 years. We're looking at an optimal silent phase of 18 months. We're looking at, please tell me you're looking at it being volunteer-driven rather than staff-driven, and that you're following the concept of sequential solicitation, largest gifts first. So, for instance, you know what it might take to raise $25 million. You need a lead gift of about $2.5 million or slightly more, and then another gift of $1.5 million, and then 2 gifts of $1 million, and 2 gifts of $750,000, and so on down the pyramid until you reach the level of many small gifts and are able to open it up to the public phase. So getting ready for a feasibility study, I guess the question is, why do one? Because I run into clients all the time that say, oh no, we're not going to do a feasibility study, or oh no, we're not going to hire a campaign consultant. So here's some good reasons to have one. One, to gain internal consensus about your goals, both financial and aspirational. You want to be testing your case for support to see if it resonates with people that are outside your universe. And when you are talking to people during a feasibility study, the consultant is actually doing you a service in that they are pre-marketing your campaign for you. You get to listen to donors. Hey, what a concept. And if we're really honest, we're going to be able to determine if donors think that the staff, and that means all of us, researchers, gift officers, management, etc., are really up to the task. And finally, you want to test the achievability of the financial goal, right? So research really needs a place at the table early on, and I think Mike has got some really good stuff to say about that.
Well, if you look at the points that you really need to be ready for a feasibility study, research is going to play a role in every one of these. If you're going to just, for example, listen to the donors, research is going to inform you of which donors you're going to be listening to. To test the achievability of the goal. That's going to take the input of the research. If research doesn't really have the wheels on and isn't at the table, I would say you're not really ready for a campaign. And I think a lot of times your boards and your presidents get really anxious to just let's start moving things. And if they hurry up the process too much and they want to get, feet on the street, people knocking on doors, if research isn't there to support and make sure that those feet are going in the right directions and the right doors are getting knocked on, the campaign is going to lose some momentum. It's going to lose momentum. You're going to lose credibility with your prospects, your donors, your members, your board, and it's going to really be an uphill battle. So research has to be ahead of the game and be prepared and be at the table for a feasibility study.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think they need to be there way before a feasibility study is considered or consultants even hired. The other thing, and I've encountered this sadly in many situations, is that research really needs to be able to speak truth to power, whether that's the VP for advancement or the president or the CEO, because if they see that the data is showing there's insufficient resources within the database, the donor database, and the board is pushing for some BHAG, some big, hairy, audacious goal, they should be allowed to have that conversation and not have their heads chopped off. So we all know about the old school feasibility study, right? I mean, if we've been in fundraising for any amount of time and involved with a campaign. So what do? You retain a consulting firm. They go out, they interview 30 to 50 key supporters and community leaders, staff, and board. They compile the results by hand. They deliver it back to the leadership of the organization, and they say, yes, you can do a campaign, or no, not at this time, you can't, and here's what you ought to do moving forward to prepare for one of the next, X number of years, right? Happily, this is starting to change. In fact, we're seeing more seasoned campaign consultants make it part of their RFP, that data screening and sometimes even a major gift model needs to be done prior to them even answering the RFP for the campaign. And I say good for them. So really the data-driven methodology would be you screen the database first. And then you want to do a minimum of a major gift model. That is going to give you the cream of the cream of the cream of the cream, the people who behave the very most like your existing major donors. And then you need to have those results ready to present to whoever the selected campaign council is. The other thing that we really encourage is that you allow your Wealth Engine consultant to actually partner with your campaign consultant and share insights about the data, etc. Every campaign consultant varies in their understanding of data analytics and of our scores. And so there's been a number of occasions that I've had to do that, and it's ended up being really a delightful experience and fruitful on both ends, but more important, fruitful for the client. And then the final thing is to interview fewer people in person, so you're maximizing your time, and then you can use an online survey like SurveyMonkey or something like that for your second-tier prospects. And you can ask them the same questions, but give it on survey form, and that's going to save you time, money, wear and tear, etc. So really, during the feasibility process, a key question that you're asking donors and interviewees is, who do you know, who else do you know that we should be talking to? Mike, did you uncover a lot of prospects this way during your recent campaign?
Well, our campaign, like I mentioned, started about the same time I started, which was 2005, when we cranked into a silent phase in the second half of 2006. And when I started here, we were in the midst of the old school methodology, where let's go find 30 or 50 people who are pretty close to the flagpole, run it up, see who salutes type of attitude. Within a year, it became pretty clear that we had to go with the data-driven and really take a look at who we had and what we were capable of doing. So we did ultimately, with the wealth screening, identify more prospects than we would have any kind of old school way. And the test of time has shown through that course of the campaign, we were able to use some best practices and move those people towards their giving capacities.
Great. So, one of the things that you can do is, as you uncover these new prospects, is to do kind of one-off screenings and find Wealth 8 to, do a quick eyeball of who these people are. And if you've done a major gift model, how closely do they fit the model? So that can be really, really helpful.
And obviously we're in a very volatile time. The model may not age very well.
Well, a model actually ages out in about 18 months.
Right.
We always say, 18 to 24 months is the longest you should really go with a model.
Correct. Right.
We do have some clients that within a year they will refresh the model and then run new constituents through that. So there's different ways to do it. So let's talk about preparing properly to get your data ready. So the first thing to do is to be sure your database is just squeaky, squeaky clean. And we actually provide those services. We can remove dupes, we can find lost alums, we can do a national change of address, we can do a deceased depend to find out if people have passed. And that we recommend that you do that all the time before a screening and modeling for the most current and accurate results. Mike, do you have other best practices you can add from your experience?
Yeah, keeping the database squeaky clean is just it's good hygiene. It's like if you're going to have a healthy lifestyle, you don't just get on the treadmill once every 6 years and think you're going to be in good shape. It's going to have to be something that is done rigorously, vigorously, and you have to work at it. You can't just let it sit there and get out of shape. And so that, and you're going to have to. You can't just do. To continue the analogy, if you're just doing crunches the whole time, you're not really working through the whole thing. You have to use different processes and to keep everything in good shape.
Like the guys that I see at the gym who only work on their biceps and shoulders and have a little bit of legs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Once you get all of this done, your campaign consultants are going to ask you for some things. They're going to ask for a clean list of your foremost individual donors with about 3 to 5 years of giving history. They are going to want the P2G score, estimated giving capacity, any additional appended data that you have gotten, and then your major gift model scores. So please take note and prepare appropriately. Now let's move on and talk about how you can identify ask-ready individuals. Okay? So who are your low-hanging fruit? We hear that term a lot, and this goes for campaign or not campaign, just regular old everyday fundraising. So you want to look at prior donors with the capacity to make larger gifts, obviously. You want to look at friends and relatives and colleagues of your volunteer leaders, including your boards, all your boards and advisory committees and so on. And then one that a lot of people tend to overlook is your vendors. If you think about how much money your organization is spending with certain vendors, what I've had good luck doing is getting a list of vendors and the value of the annual contract and sorting by that value, and then actually going and having a courageous conversation with the vendor. It's usually 3 times you get kicked to the curb, and then the 4th time you come back with a check, but that's the way it goes. Anyway.
I think it's interesting that actually with the campaign, we got about 2/3 of the way through, and I actually produced a report that was literally and actually called Low-Hanging Fruit. And it was looking for people who meet this criteria, the people who are the prior donors, who have been good friends and supporters all along, people that we could go out and start closing gifts. I compare it to like if your church wants a new organ, you start with the people in the choir. And so that's who we were looking for with our low-hanging fruit. But
you don't want the guy who comes on Christmas Eve?
Well, unless he owns a organ company, you might want to be aware of him then. So.
Good one. Okay. So what are some clues to readiness? Mike, when we were talking about this, had mentioned that some of the constituents that he worked with the campaign had, it was philanthropy or some type of communication, right?
Right. They self-identify either through their annual giving or they're communicating through social media. They're waving some sort of flag. Right.
So here's some of the flags. So they might ask a lot of questions about fundraising. How could they help you? They actually pick up the phone when you, the gift officer, call them, and they actually respond to your email. They might give you advice. They might get their friends involved as volunteers or something like that. They might attend events. They might start saying "we" when they're talking about themselves and your nonprofit. This one I've experienced a lot. They hang around. They drop in. They, stop in to say hello. I was in the neighborhood. Blah blah blah. Here's a big shocker. They offer to give you money.
Right.
They have a history of giving to your organization, and finally, the gifts have increased in amount over the years. They've tested you. They've found you worthy, and they are starting to invest in you. So Mike had mentioned that some of Michigan Tech's low-hanging fruit began to self-identify by their giving and others' behaviors. I just gave you that little checklist, and all of that's great, but I would be remiss if I didn't remind you about your P2G scores. So anyone who's scored as a P2G 1 is like that little kid on the little cartoon going, pick me, pick me. They deserve your immediate attention because the P2G 1 is really based on how strong the qualities of match are in the screening, their capacity, and most importantly, behaviors that point to a major gift donor. It could be things like family foundation, it could be things like sitting on several nonprofit boards, it could be a lot of giving in the community and to political causes, et cetera, et cetera. So watch those behaviors and consider what you know about your donors and prospects, and then marry that with the art and science and data analytics for your best success. And now, drum roll, for some cautionary tales from the trenches. The first we will tongue-in-cheek call it the case of the Coy MD. And this is a true story, and it is one that I was involved with. So we were working with a school in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which, as you all know, is kind of a hangout of the rich and famous. And this school was in the midst of a really big capital campaign. They were building an entirely new campus. And this new family moved to the area from Manhattan, and they thought that was kind of interesting. So they knew that the family had capacity and they wanted to get to know the family and deepen the relationship, but the dad was behaving really oddly. So he would drop off their two kids every morning in his really nice Mercedes SUV, and then he would just about, three-wheel it out of the parking lot, laying rubber almost, rather than getting out of the car and socializing with the other parents, which was common practice. So our development team there found this kind of curious, and they asked us to do some research. And I found out, doing the research, and Wealth Engine was part of that research, that this guy also held several medical device patents, and he was on a couple of boards of the manufacturers of those devices as a scientific consultant, and he received significant pay for his service there. Not only that, but, he was a surgeon. But why would you leave New York City, and why was he acting sort of so skittish? So we finally captured a little tidbit of information, and here's where that intuitive part, that connecting the dot part of being a good researcher came together. We found out that the family had lived in a penthouse that was just blocks from the Twin Towers. And so after 9/11, they had literally feared for their lives and made the decision to move to a much more rural area and make a new beginning. The doctor's wife was a very devoted, experienced equestrian, and so they decided to buy a horse ranch and breed horses for show. Well, they were lucky that they had the money to make this happen. So with this information in hand, the development director started doing something different. He actually went outside in the morning and started greeting the parents himself. He knew most of them, but he thought, why not? And that's how he finally broke through with this fellow. The MD, the Coy MD, rolled up one day with the kids, and he actually rolled down his window and chatted with the development director briefly. And so slowly, over some months, the family started becoming involved, and the happy ending was a sizable campaign gift. So that's a good story. Now we have another story, which, as you can see from this sad picture from the book of Bunny Suicides, it does not have a happy ending. So once again, I was in the middle of doing an in-depth donor profile in a wealthy vacation home community, which will remain unnamed, or you'll probably figure out who the client might have been. And I was almost done with the profile. I had done the Wealth Engine stuff, I'd done some other digging, done some newspaper searches, etc. I was putting it all together as a profile, and I knew that this prospect had the capacity to make a seven-figure gift. And he had only been making low six-figure gifts. And so the time was right to have a really good conversation and make a case to this guy why he should invest in this organization. I was just finishing the profile up when my phone rang, and I answered the phone, and the consultant at our firm who was working with this client said to me in this really flat voice, "Hey, you won't believe this." Well, what happened was the client had gotten impatient, and he jumped the gun, and he booked a meeting with this prospect, and he asked the prospect for a $5,000 gift, and that's exactly what he got. No more. So talk about shooting yourself in the foot, right? I think we can see the importance of research and gift officers working together closely with that one, because without it, you may leave money on the table. You might ask your donor to support something that they have absolutely no interest in, or you might ask so ridiculously high that while they may seem flattered, they really you lose credibility with them. Do you have any cautionary tales, Mike?
Well, I think the number one thing is to avoid, and or it could be a trap, is the under ask. If there's somebody who has a capacity of 6 figures and you're routinely just accepting that $100 and not really taking a hard look where the misconnect is and how to move up your connectivity to that person's capacity, I think that's the main trap to avoid. I think people might laugh it off if you ask them too much, but if you're continually under asking, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Exactly. So let's take a look at some practical things we can do as researchers and as gift officers to have a little bit more warm, fuzzy kumbaya in our professional lives. Mike?
Well, I think when both sides are getting frustrated, when both sides, I'm saying the gift officers and the advancement staff, it could be a problem of people just kind of chasing metrics and not really chasing a mission, where you've got gift officers who maybe are looking for just raw numbers in visits and not activity. And and conversely, if a research shop, if they have to just produce biographical profiles one after another without a clear direction, that's going to lead to frustration on that side, and you need to be pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's really more important to track cost to raise a dollar and ROI than, 50 visits a month or 25 prospect profiles or validating, 100 screen results a month. But there's another issue to that I see very often, and it's that researchers tend to want to polish diamonds, as my friend and colleague Scott Richards calls it here at WellVision. So I think it's because there's such a push-pull between researchers and gift officers, and the gift officers tend to be kind of data agnostic. So the researchers tend to spend a lot of time trying to validate the screening results when they really don't have to. You need to look for directional accuracy again and not that 100% perfection. Right.
And I think sometimes gift officers will feel frustrated and use the analysis or paralysis by analysis, waiting for that 100% perfection, instead of just taking the professional researchers' experience and intuition, saying, yes, this is something you can proceed on.
I agree. So I have to confess, one of my pet peeves are these non-development professionals setting goals for development professionals that are based on either assumption or even hubris. So let's take a hard look at our KPIs, our key performance indicators. So are the metrics achievable? Are they even measurable? Are gift officers carrying a 600-person portfolio? And please don't laugh, because I actually know some who do. Enough with the magical thinking already. Yep. Mike, you said something about kind of fluff visits earlier.
Right. This is, if you have, say, gift officers responsible for 20 or 25 or whatever visits per month, they're going to take the path of least resistance. Quite frankly, it's going to be easier to have 5 visits with retirees at your local Denny's than it is to get past a couple gatekeepers to get into the corner office. So it's when there's a tendency to want to pad, and I think researchers are in a position to be aware of some of that padding, and that can lead to some disconnect.
Okay. So how on earth can these two very different types of personalities learn to get along better and work together effectively and creatively? So let's look at a few of the things we have in common, because researchers and gift officers most often are really good oral and written communicators, confident, dedicated, and hardworking. They have integrity, or they should. They're intelligent. They're most often able to multitask, and they're curious. But the biggest thing is the passion for the mission, right? Exactly.
If everyone's got that commitment, they have the same buy-in. That's the big common ground. Everything else is you can work around, but if everyone's on that same team with the same passion, you're more than halfway there.
Mike, do you think that sometimes researchers tend to think that gift officers have a cushy job?
I do. I think having kind of had lived in both worlds, I think researchers, we kind of see the gift officers come in from the road. When they do come in, sometimes they're coming in late, pretty late. And then we see them go make a couple phone calls, shuffle some paperwork around. Maybe they go to the water cooler with their other gift officers, have some stories from the road, and then they go and they shake the hand of leadership that congratulate them. So it looks kind of fun and cushy, be at hotels and swimming pools and everything. But what we're not really seeing is a lot of the tedious stuff, that the 20 phone calls that it took to just even get a couple visits together for the trip, and being stuck in O'Hare for 7 hours, and you finally get to your destination and your meeting's delayed and you're stuck for 90 minutes in a lobby, and there's nothing but a bunch of old trade magazines about something very droll. And then finally you get your meeting, and the person hijacks the conversation and makes it about maybe some petty parking ticket from 20 years ago. You get back to the hotel, the cable doesn't work, you call home, and the kids are resentful because you're not home. All of this is something that the researchers aren't aware of, all of that kind of load that the gift officers are carrying. And if we're trying to find these, to play nice, researchers can, if they're a little more empathetic to the non-glamorous side, I think we're taking a big step toward meeting them in the middle.
Yeah, I know for sure from personal experience it's not always easy to be a road warrior, so my hat is off to those people who are doing that all the time.
Right.
So those are really wise words, Mike. So with that, we will remind you once again that it's really the art of relationships, meaning the science of data and analytics and wealth screening, that creates the real sweet spot in fundraising. Researchers and gift officers both have vital roles to play in making that sweet spot happen. And I can't resist the pun and to say, so do we, Wealth Engine.
Right.
So thanks so much, Mike. And now let's open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you, Linda and Mike. We have had a few questions come in. The first one is in reference to when you were speaking about capital campaigns. What do you mean by silent phase of 18 plus months?
Okay, the silent phase of about 18 months is when you are getting up to about 70%, 75% of your campaign goal. You don't announce it publicly yet because you want to squelch any skepticism, you want to create momentum, and you want to be able to announce to the public that, you know, we are $21 million in towards a $25 million goal. Yay, Philanthropist A, yay, Philanthropist B, join us in bringing this campaign to a very successful conclusion, and that's when you start, you know, with the smaller gifts. Every amount helps. We call it all in. You know, this is the time when you sell bricks and pavers with people's names on them and all of that. So that's really the silent phase.
Right. You know, this is when you want to bring in your maybe more general audience, your general donors. They're gonna see that they're gonna place a winning bet. If you're already, you know, the finish line is in sight, the goal
Right.
is very attainable, then they're much more likely to jump on board than when you're 1% of the way there.
Exactly.
Another question that came in is, what's the 5-to-1 rule of larger gifts?
Okay, that is with mega gifts, and it is essentially this. It takes 5 qualified prospects to be solicited in order to close one major gift. So that's just sort of a rule of thumb that is used in major gift fundraising. It used to be known as the 3-to-1 rule, but donors have gotten, since the economic downturn in 2008, 2009, they've gotten considerably chillier feet. And so now we say with the mega gifts especially, it's a 5-to-1 rule.
And this is where researchers really have to step up and manage expectations. If you're putting forward 5 or 10 or 15 of your very topmost prospects, that has to be forwarded with the caveat or the understanding that that's really 1, 3, or 5 ultimate gifts that are going to close. That's where researchers are going to have to be, like I said, at the table at the get-go.
Great. Next question. Do you find that gift officers are threatened by research officers that are ESTJs? The person who submitted this question is a former gift officer that has this Myers-Briggs profile that has also been a researcher.
Boy, that's a good one. I really don't have an answer for you because the researchers I know tend to be all on the introvert side. But Mike, you said earlier before the webinar, you said you tended to be sort of more in the middle. So maybe
Right.
You're more along those lines, and you could speak to that.
Well, we have about 8 full-time gift officers, plus we have different people who do outreach for us. I don't see any kind of conflicts where they feel intimidated. It's not an issue I've seen. I think I can't imagine where that would. If there's an atmosphere like that, I think it needs to be addressed before it could possibly become toxic. I think that seems more of a one-on-one thing than a general thing to all shops.
Great, thank you, Mike. Another question is, if your board hasn't articulated a direction, management is in transition, multiple databases exist, and all the organization has is an eager institutional advancement assistant, what should that assistant do to help the organization move forward?
I am going to say this, it's going to sound flip, and I don't mean it to, but I think that eager institutional advancement assistant needs to find another job. Because quite frankly, that organization is in disarray, and it needs much better direction from the top than somebody at the assistant level can provide. And you're just going to find yourself trying to push a giant 20-ton cement wheel uphill with your body weight, and it isn't going to work.
And I think people, even in the most healthiest or robust organizations, find it can it's not always successful to try to manage upward. And if there's a situation where there's chaos at the top, that's even a harder load to push up.
If there's chaos at the top, you can be sure that some people in the community already know that, or at the very least sense it. I've been in situations like that, and really it is a recipe for failure.
Thank you. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I wanted to give Mike and Linda another opportunity just to provide any other last comments.
I guess my comment is just when you're trying to work with the researchers and the researchers' personality and the gift officers and their personality, I think that you really want to be it's got to be a complementary relationship. It can't be two of the exact same types of people working together. My wife, God bless her, did a little matchmaking where she had two very extroverted, garrulous friends. She thought they'd be perfect together. They went out on a date, and they both came back with the attitude of, what a horrible person, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. So it helps to have the complementary people that all the gaps are filled and not just one gap on one side filled. So that, I think, just work together and recognize that your strengths can be somebody else's weaknesses, and you can compensate for each other.
And I'd like to say that something that I've always tried to do as a gift officer is give plenty of recognition where recognition is due to the researchers who were key in helping to uncover information or data that provided the kind of insight that brought a gift to fruition. I just think it is so important because as gift officers we do tend to get those high fives
Right.
to call out, shout out, give props to those fine researchers who work as part of your team.
Great. Well, Mike and Linda, thank you so much for speaking today. This was a fantastic webinar. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. For everyone listening, thank you for joining, and we will be sending out the slides and recording of this webinar in about 24 hours. Thank you.